And so the fundamentals about how we are laid out just from a physical space are challenged by not having the number of federal workers that we had before the pandemic. So thinking about how we're going to get most of our workers back most of the time, that continues to be what we know is best for Washington, and I dare say best for America. But we also know that it won't happen fast enough to make the type of impact that we think that we need in our downtown. So having a strategy to repurpose and to revitalize buildings is important. My team will meet with federal officials to start that conversation. Yes.
More robust and a little bit larger than the last plan. How much of that is in response to the growing competition in the jurisdictions outside of DC?
I don't know that it's in response to anything, but what we note is the challenges that we have as a city and what we need to do to stay competitive, of course, to transform our downtown, to attract residents and jobs. And that's what makes our city robust. I think what sometimes get lost is the why. Why do we do this? Big cities, world capitals have thriving downtowns. And so we have to stay focused on how we bring that back. But also having a tax base that supports the amenities that we enjoy in our city is hugely important. And it is something to be worried about. The downtown has been the economic engine of our city. It's the reason why we have been able to make huge investments in schools, in transportation, in social services, in public safety. And so any kind of threat to the health of the fiscal health of the downtown, it's not about the property owners. It is in some respects because they could suffer some losses. But what it means if they suffer losses is that the bottom line for the city, our commercial revenue tax base, could also suffer. Yep.
So one of the issues, I guess, of bringing back D.C. must be the issue of crime. Certainly lately, we've been hearing a number of things. I think somebody was shot at the Navy Yard last night. I saw something the other day. I guess people went to the Capitol Center and Councilmember Trayon White had his car broken into. I mean, what about the crime? How does that affect your ability to, let's say, bring D.C. back?
Well, as any city or any mayor will tell you, I wake up every day with public safety is the first thing that I'm thinking about. And so keeping the city safe is going to take all of us. And it is going to take, quite frankly, making sure that the policies that govern public safety, the people that we need to implement public safety and all the systems are working together.
You've had some trouble recruiting, I think, police officers and in some cases.
We're hiring great officers, Sam. You know that we had in the last several years, 2 years where we couldn't hire at all. When I became mayor, we had about 3,800 officers. Now I think we're just over 3,300 officers. So that 2 years has a big impact on where we are with the number of officers. I'm very committed, as is the chief, to make sure we're doing our level best to recruit, but not affect the quality of officers that we have.
Do you think people are concerned about coming into D.C. when they hear about carjackings and vandalism and such as this in the commercial areas?
I think that there is that people are concerned about public safety. Yes, I do. And I think that what I know for sure that's that in our downtown, on our metro systems and neighborhoods across all 8 wards, we're very focused on making sure that we have the police presence that we need. But I think it's also important to say, while none of us is satisfied with the level of crime, we spent all of last year on every aspect of the public safety system, making more investments, better deployments, and we saw some success. We saw the number of shootings and homicides go down. Sadly, though, and violent crime in total went down. But any time that we have increased robbery and carjacking, people won't feel safe. So we wake up every single day working on that.
A couple of months ago, the chief, at one of your breakfasts, mentioned how the crime was going down, violent crime was down. But there was this perception that because more guns are being used and robberies and carjackings might be up, that people don't necessarily feel safe, even if the numbers suggest that they should. How long does it take to change that perception, and how do you do it?
We have to stop robbery and carjacking in our city. And we have to be focused when the police are making arrests and working with all of our criminal justice partners that we are really feeling the effect of that work. We also have to get to people before they're committing crimes. And that's why we're heavily invested in our violence interruption programs to try to get to people before they're committing crimes. Yes.
Many in the community are horrified over a shooting that happened this weekend, an alleged robbery, 13-year-old shot by a person going to confront that teenager. I want to ask you your response to that, but first, how much of this happening, this incident, do you feel is because of the city's inability to address property crimes, such as what you're speaking about?
Well, first of all, we would rather be talking about a 13-year-old going to school today than to talk about him being killed on one of our streets. And I am incredibly saddened by that. I know that MPD is working on this investigation, and it's ongoing, and they are in consultation with the United States Attorney.
Can you speak to your conversation with police? Do you know, first off, if there is surveillance video?
I can't
this
speak to
incident?
any of the facts.
Do you feel that the shooter should be identified, even if they're not charged?
That's part of the investigation, and it's ongoing.
Have any message to the community? Obviously, this.
This
Again,
is my message, and my message is, in any time, for any reason that there is a public safety concern, residents should call 911. Our operators are there to answer their calls, and the police are there to respond to any concerns that they have. So my message is to call 911. Yep.
Just staying on this topic for a second, the narrative that we know so far officially from police is that this resident who had a legally registered weapon with a concealed carry permit heard commotion outside late at night, went outside, confronted a 13-year-old, and shot him dead. Is that acceptable to you? I mean, somebody left their house, they weren't breaking into their house, they went outside to apparently try to protect property and use lethal force. And that doesn't happen every day in your city.
No, it doesn't. But also, Mark, I'm not going to talk about any of the facts, and I'm going to allow the police to complete their investigation.
Do you think using lethal force, a resident using, what's your message to residents who
I just told you, if you feel that there is a public safety issue in or around your home, call 911. That is the appropriate thing to do, to call 911. Yep.
Mayor, I know you have a meeting with school leaders and the Chancellor Dunbar to talk about this crisis that it appears our children are in right now. Your deputy mayor just spoke to our Lorenzo Hall and said it is difficult to be a young person in D.C. What do you plan to talk about during that conference, during that meeting? And what is your call to action to parents, to community leaders, to school leaders as well, to kind of get this under control about the crisis our kids are in?
Well, let me say this, Delia. It's difficult for many young people. Many young people are living a great life in D.C. They're going to schools that are great. They have teachers that are wonderful. They have free out-of-school activities. They have wonderful parks and rec. They have fields, and they are thriving. So there are many, many kids who are doing quite well growing up in Washington, D.C. There are many, many kids, however, who are vulnerable, who are at risk, and who have already demonstrated that they will use guns and that they will commit crime. And so what I want everybody to know, in our city, we have programs and services for each of them. Some of them, however, have to be required to participate. And so I wanted to be real clear to parents, to prosecutors, to judges. Some kids facing the consequences of their actions actually means that they're going to get a lifeline to services. And so I want to be especially clear about that. I did call a meeting of our school professionals for the beginning of the year. Because what I think is important, when people look at me and say, Mayor, what are we doing about this? I always want to know that everybody that works for the government sees what their role is in violence prevention. And school leaders have a huge role. Their first responsibility is to educate the kids, to take care of the teachers, and support the parents that are in their schools. But I also want to make sure there is a connection among DCPS, public charter schools, and the entire rest of the government about being an early warning sign for kids who are in trouble, but also what the role of the school is in violence prevention.
We were told, or we understand, that this young person, the 13-year-old, was in the foster care system and was missing when he was 11 years old. Was this a child in crisis that we let slip through the cracks? How do we
I can't
services to the right person?
I don't know that your information is correct, and even if it was, I wouldn't be able to discuss it now. Yeah.
Back to today's event, is there a price tag for this plan that you have? You would acknowledge that it may take more resources, more staff, and possibly even incentives to businesses for hiring or coming here. Have you figured out any kind of price tag and where that money might come from?
It will come from our general funds, or it will come from any federal funds that we have available. And I will say we haven't, and I'm going to ask John to talk about our experience so far and what we put aside for the Vitality Fund. But part of the reason why we have an early introduction. Number one, it's ready to have this conversation. We continue to ask for any public input or ideas. But we will also be able to include in my budget proposal any new investments we need for this year.
So, Mark, part of the work that this plan enables is for the district to submit this plan to the federal government, to the Economic Development Agency, and that allows for the district, as well as stakeholders like universities and nonprofits, to go after certain federal funding. So this report or this plan is actually a first step that actually unlocks other resources from the federal government. And then similarly, the mayor has put out big goals before. In 2019, she put out the goal to make us the first city in the country to have affordable housing targets by neighborhood. Months after she announced that goal, we put out a report that allowed us to show how we would get to that goal and some of the tools and initiatives that we would need to get there. So similarly, with the goals that you see in this report, there'll be extra work and attention and focus that goes into us putting together sort of the people, the policies, and the processes, as well as the funding to achieve the goals.
Could I just clarify an earlier answer? You were asked if you had reached out to the federal government about your desire to have them either bring federal workers back downtown or relinquish that space. You answered yes, but then you went on to say that there are plans for meetings. So I'm wondering, have you transmitted a letter or anything to the White House, to the president, asking him to do just what you have told us several times now in public?
I just answered that, Mark.
Well, you left me confused because you said you had, but then you said there were meetings planned in the future.
Both are true.
So you have sent a letter? Or?
No, I didn't say I sent a letter.
Well, how did you convey
on
this?
the telephone.
Who did you talk to on the telephone?
I'm not getting into the details of conversations that I had
Somebody in
like
the White
that.
House? I mean, can you give us a...
As I said all I'm going to say about that. Okay. Yeah, sure.
Eleanor Holmes Norton's office just noted that the House GOP rules would take away floor access, I believe, for the D.C. mayor and other territories as well, something governors have. Is this sort of access something you've considered using previously at all?
I haven't used it in 8 years. I think it sounds like some petty thing that was developed in the rules. And I don't laugh it off, however, because it shows how petty some people will be. So it helps us be very focused on protecting our democracy and home rule. And sadly, we'll probably have to do that.
Did you ever consider like owning the grand entrance to the House floor about this terrorist writer or the abortion writer in the past few years?
I haven't done it in 8 years. That's all I have to say about that. I didn't think it would be effective. My strategies with the members of the Congress have been to deal with them on very specific issues and to try to win their support. Thank you, everybody.
We now return to our previously scheduled program, already in progress.